Well, welcome everybody to episode 4 of Business Jam Live. Just a little apology before we start. I'm still getting over COVID, so I might sound a little nasal. I'll try my best to be enthusiastic and bouncy, but that's the job of my guest. He can do that. So before we start, people will be tuning in on Facebook, uh, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'd like you to comment or ask questions. If you're on Facebook, can I just ask you to do this, please? Can you go to this URL? And it means that if you do ask a question or comment, your name will come up rather than just Facebook user, because that's just a little bit more polite, I think. So, what a show we have for you today. Yeah, you probably won't have come across a guest like this before. So when I first asked him on the show, and I explained that jam was improvisation, it wasn't actually a fruit-based condiment. He said, well, he was rather looking forward to linking jam to business concepts. I talked to him last week, and I reminded him of this. And he said, and I quote, I look forward to arguing my general organizational theories about mangoes and how the challenging pomegranate deserves more attention as a metaphor for leadership excellence. So this sounds great stuff to me. So how about I actually introduce our guest for today? He is the international authority on failure. He is the founder and curator of the Museum of Failure. He's a clinical psychologist, organizational psychologist, and he has a PhD in playing at work. So please welcome Samuel West.
Hello. I when you in the introduction there about mangoes and pomegranates as organizational theory metaphors, I hope that's part of the business jam part, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, first things first. Let's
Yeah.
let's start at let's start at the beginning. Well,
Okay.
wherever the
Okay.
beginning is.
I'll save my nervousness for then.
So
Okay.
yeah, you can work your nervousness off as we go through.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first, how did you get? Where did your journey start? I know you're not 85 years old, but you're not 15 years old either. So
No.
where did your
No.
journey start to get to where you are?
Well, I mean, I'm a clinical psychologist, so by training, so I did therapy and the regular, uh, you know, bread and butter of psychology for about 10 years, and then I got tired of that. So I started working more with organizational groups in different sort of contexts, uh, and kind of fell in love with. The idea like anybody who does workshops or teach like all day teaching sessions, it doesn't matter how interesting it is, it gets boring after a while. And I was just more and more fascinated by how professional workshop holders and teachers have like sort of, you would call it like energizers or little funny silly games they play to get people sort of reconnected to the topic at hand. And I started looking into it, and I thought that's the most fun thing about the workshops, I thought, that I held. So moving from that thinking like how can I basically, it's not as fancy as it sounds, but I was really thinking about how can I get paid to play at work. um, and the best way to do that was to research play at work. So I put together a research program that was accepted by Lund University, and spent 6 years researching how people play at work and how a playful work environment facilitates creativity and innovation. And that led to that sort of approach to work, and just about everything led to Museum of Failure in 2016-17. And that's basically what I do now full time, is take care of Museum of Failure and do talks and workshops based on those themes of learning from failure, accepting failure, creating a failure friendly organizational culture, etc.
Right. Well, before we talk a bit more about the Museum of Failure, I have one of those nice little videos you sent me to play, just to
I don't know which
give
one you're
people
going to show.
the Minneapolis one.
Oh, okay, that's cool. That's a good one.
It's just I think it'd be fair to call these pop-up museums, wouldn't it? They're a bit bigger than a normal pop-up thing, but they pop up everywhere. So just for a minute or so, folks, just have a look at an example of the Museum of Failure.
The Museum of Failure is a collection of failed innovations. It's products, it's services, we have food stuff, high-tech stuff, old items, new items. They're obscure items from around the world.
It is a cool, fun exhibit. Some of these, like, what were they thinking?
You walk around in the museum, you see the big boys, Google, Apple, Microsoft, etc., etc. You see that they fail when they try something new, when they push their boundaries. And they all are at the museum to teach us that we need to accept failure, and there will be no progress without failure.
Well, what more can I say? I mean, that was it the Pepsi Black or Coke Black? I can't remember which way it was, but the black flavor. The Trump steaks.
Man, you're digging into some of the good ones here. The everybody knows about Pepsi, Crystal Pepsi, the clear cola drink, but not so many people know about Coca-Cola Black. And Coca-Cola Black was so Coca-Cola in 2000. I think it was 14, 15, if I remember right, they saw a trend in people were drinking more and more coffee, and that coffee is cool. So they're like, let's combine coffee with Diet Coke. That's a great idea. Mixed it together, they have Coca-Cola Black. For the ultra sophisticated young professional consumer, that's who was supposed to drink it. It was horrible. I tried it. I remember buying it. I found it in France. I remember at the hotel, I was like all excited because it was a fancy bottle. I tasted it. I still remember pouring it down the drain.
Indeed. I mean, it might be a very simplistic question. I mean, that sort of says how some of these failures come to be, in terms of somebody asks. Either they make a silly assumption, like, I mean, let's rewind here. There's always a case somewhere along the line that people look at they mix up causation and correlation. So people think because something happens, that something else happens, and in fact, it's a correlation, not a causation.
Absolutely.
So it sounds to me like the Coke for the aspiring young professionals was like one of these. The young professionals drink black stuff, coffee, therefore black Coke. Must, but nobody really But are they all like that? Or are some of them people throw in lots of money, do very sophisticated research, and still get it wrong?
Yeah. But we shouldn't stop at Coca-Cola Black. It's not maybe the most interesting object at the museum, but I mean, Coca-Cola is not a stupid company, and they know their market, they know their consumers, they definitely know the beverage market. If any company does, it's Coca-Cola. So they don't create a new product unless they've done their research, they do their testing, etc., etc. So there's a lot of people, a lot of competent people that signed off on the Coca-Cola Black to launch it. So it wasn't just a test, sort of a random shot out into the blue to see what would happen. And they still failed despite knowing all of that. So it does, what I think it does, it reminds us how risky innovation is, even for these super rich, super competent and experienced companies. But to answer your question, I mean, some of the objects in the museum are just like he said in the video, they're like, what were they thinking? Like somebody just had a great idea, dumped a bunch of money into it, and then it didn't work out. But most of the innovations are still a result of, you know, of a fairly strict process within these organizations.
You do wonder sometimes, but
So
which
there's one from the UK that I'm fascinated with, but nobody else seems to be interested in it. It's called the Amstrad emailer. Do you remember this?
I know the brand Amstrad, but I can't remember the product.
No, exactly, which is a shame because it killed the company more or less. So what's his name, Sir
Alan Sugar.
Alan Sugar, big shot entrepreneur and inventor. Powerful dude, had this vision that he wanted people to connect to the internet, and this is a great idea at the time. But so he created this advanced fax / computer device called the emailer, and the idea was that everybody could afford to connect to the internet. But by that, it was only email, right? So this device was launched when people could actually buy real computers and connect to real internet. But the Amstrad emailer was a device you could only connect to their servers, and you had to pay a per minute charge to be connected. And the idea was so bad, nobody within the company supported it. Consumers hated it. Everybody hated it. But this bold visionary entrepreneur still, spearheaded the project. And ultimately, it led to the demise of the company in many ways. And nobody knows about it. And I'm fascinated with that story, because otherwise, usually CEOs and the entrepreneurial founder of a company, the visionary, gets all the praise for being so visionary. But it's seldom we hear of the other side of the story, that it can also be stupidity.
So it's also the other side of the coin, isn't it? Because you've got somebody doing something that ultimately ruins the company.
Yeah.
But then you have companies like Kodak. They effectively ruin themselves by not doing something.
Yeah.
So you can be damned if you do and damned if you don't. The other thing I want to ask you about before we wander completely off piste later on is the idea of failure itself, because we get all this stuff in the press. Oh, failure's good. You must fail, and
it's great. Yeah.
I've taken part in many of these debates as well. But people then seem to think to get the idea that failure is almost guaranteed, but the more you do it, the quicker you get to the successful bit, rather than thinking we should just learn from failure when it happens. So are people still going ahead failing as quickly as they can, or has that are they going to keep doing that, or are we going to learn from failure? What's actually happening now, failure wise?
I mean, so failure, I didn't know this at the time when I started Museum of Failure, but I started it at the right time, in like the sort of the zeitgeist of failure, and how cool failure was. There's fuck up nights, there's FailCon, the CEOs of some of the biggest, most well-known company were on stage at the time, 2015, 16, talking about how important it is to fail. So failure was the beginning of failure as being cool. But what has happened since then, and I mean, COVID and has definitely played a role in that, is that I don't know if we've reached peak failure or not, but there's definitely a backlash. Like, wait, not all failure is good. And if we fail but don't learn from it, then it's definitely a waste in so many regards. But I think today, to answer your question about how are people still taking risks and fail, I would say no, not enough. I'm obviously biased, but there's still, in most organizations, whether they're public or private, there's still an assumption that you can be innovative without taking risks, and that's just not the case. You need to take those risks where you try unproven methods, and push the boundaries in a way that can be uncomfortable and more or less risk prone. But most organizations need to increase their failure rate rather than decrease it.
Is that something they have to consciously do, or should they just be looking at the whole sort of organizational attitude to risk and say we need to be a little more, because there's the risk reward thing, isn't there?
Yeah.
You can take a little bit of risk and you get a little bit of reward. You can take a lot of risk and get a lot of reward, or a lot of cost. That's whatever. So are we just becoming less risk averse? More risk averse.
More risk averse. Yeah, I would say yes to that, unfortunately, because it's almost like, yeah, we want the good part, the rewards of a successful innovation, but we don't want the costs, which are 90% of innovation projects fail. You don't want those, and especially and I'm not going to blame COVID for everything, but there's definitely been a backlash there of like how willing companies are to take risks in innovation. And that's understandable. If you're trying to just survive, then you're not going to be trying to push the envelope forward. But there's also something, like you said before, about, learning, so there's different takes and approaches to risk and failure when it comes to innovation. So one of them is, like you say, like just do your thing, and can you say fuck up on this podcast?
Well, you just have, so
okay, so
you've set a precedent.
So go ahead, do your thing, and when you fuck up, then try to learn from it. That's a good approach. Most companies never even get that far, that they're actually willing to take the time and put the resources into learning from their failures. But then there's another aspect of actually taking, called sort of meaningful experimentation, where you actually purposely do experiments that are allowed to fail, that just keep going, where you actually do things that where you don't know whether they will succeed or not, and despite that, you're willing to invest the money and the time into that. And those kind of sort of that purposeful experimentation, which leads to failure more often than not, that's more rare. There are some companies that are really good at it, but they're still very rare.
So organizationally, what sort of companies are the ideal companies to avoid failure, to avoid getting into your museum?
Well, a good way to really make it into the Museum of Failure is to avoid dealing with failure, and to create a culture within the organization that sort of looks for scapegoats and tries to cover up failure in fancy corporate bullshit. That's a great way to make it into the museum. If an organization has a culture of acceptance of failure, then usually they can actually avoid the big fuck ups, the ones that lead to them being in the Museum of Failure, or even worse, leading to people dying or suffering. But if you have a culture where failure is accepted, then you can learn from that. In those iterations, you learn from it, and you fine tune the innovation process, where you can take smaller risks that where the failure doesn't damage the company or the brand. But if you have a failure avoidance perspective, then everything is a mountain, including these failures that never make it up to the surface, and then they explode when they turn too big to ignore. So trying to avoid being in the Museum of Failure is a good way to become a permanent part of the collection.
I was trying to think up some acronyms there, but I haven't managed it yet. So I mean, I know failure is your thing, but who are the most successful innovators that you've come across in terms of companies who've done the best? And they might still have
Yeah.
had the odd little
Oh,
mistake
of
here and
course,
there, but
of course.
who are the best ones, or who are the better ones?
I hate the company I'm about to mention. I really hate the company. I really dislike the owner of the company. But Amazon, it's really difficult to not be impressed with that company's willingness to take risk. And the way Amazon has not only taken risk early on when they were a insignificant startup, but they've managed to, despite all the horrible things about the company and leadership, they've still managed in their innovation process to maintain that willingness to take risk, and willingness to put money and resources into new ideas, and instead of thinking about it and having meetings and meetings and meetings to strategize and sort of foresee what would happen, they just put money into it and test it and see what happens in reality. And as they've grown as a company, they've also increased the, how big of a risk they take. I'm impressed with Amazon. I still am.
Yeah,
And
I can remember when they first started here in the UK.
yeah,
They had very few warehouses. You just ordered online, and the Royal Mail delivered the books, and they were losing, I think, £52 million a year.
yeah.
And this would have been, when would this have been?
That's about 10
Not that
years
long,
ago.
not that long ago.
No.
I'm guessing. I'm guessing a little more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and they do mess up. They mess up big time, but it doesn't deter them. I mean, what was it, Churchill, who said that success is the ability to stumble from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. That's Amazon. I mean, I just read an article a couple of months ago about Amazon's failure in the Swedish market. They came in and thought they would dominate, online retail in Sweden, and totally underestimated that the existing companies there were doing an awesome job. So Amazon is still an insignificant player in Sweden, despite massive amounts of money invested. They still couldn't get it right. So even at their core, they still screw up when they enter new markets. It's quite humbling,
What's your opinion on Google? Because that's the one that
Yeah.
people springs to mind when you ask most people who's the most innovative company
Yeah.
they can think of.
But Google is awesome. Oh, wait. Let me rewind. Pause that. Google was awesome. So they've also lost their innovative edge as they've become a mature company. But Google is unbeatable when it comes to the amount of innovation coming out. So they're willing to invest money into crazy technology or projects. But Google's problem is that they just don't take care of the stuff they develop. So there's so much innovation coming out of Google that's just not. They just don't sort of. Yeah, they're sloppy about they'll launch things, services, technology, and then just sort of let them die. There's even a website dedicated to this called, I think it's called the Google Graveyard, or Google Project Graveyard. So it's a website with, I think they have over 350 different projects, initiatives from Google, where they've more or less succeeded at launching a new service or technology, and then killed it because they didn't want to take care of it, or integrate it into Google's sort of main core business. And that's it's impressive that they have so much money and they have so much energy and creativity to continue to develop new products. But as from a business point of view, that might seem also a bit wasteful.
Which parts of the world, which regions or particular countries, where does the good stuff come from?
Oh,
or is
that's
it? I
a
mean, I mean, in the past, we've thought of ourselves in Western countries as being very
Mm,
clever and
yeah,
cool, and especially when it
yeah.
comes to tech and
Oh, yeah,
companies like China. We've said, oh, they're the people that they just copy everything or whatever, and there's been sort of stereotypes.
yeah.
But with globalization of thought, shall we say, I would have thought that's actually changed quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look at an example of that change. I mean, it's historically been, of course, the United States and Europe being the leaders in anything in any kind of innovation, and then China or Asia trying to catch up on that and being the factories for our great products. Um, it's interesting to see that change. I mean, look at TikTok. I mean, I'm too old for TikTok, but it's you can't deny how TikTok has, in just a few number of years, basically dominating for young people, at least in social media. That's not an American or European country. That's a Chinese company.
Mm.
Um, they got it right. Twitter tried, Instagram or Facebook tried. Here comes TikTok and just blows everybody away. Um, that's one example that I thought of, that I can think of first, where we in the United States or Europe can't take the historical innovation lead for granted.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I always talk about innovation I call it, innovation is a human race,
Mm,
in the sense that in the past we have been the athletes
mm.
who've had the fancy lycra gear, the cool
Yeah,
running shoes, the training
yeah.
methods, and we've won everything. And if you look over your shoulder, there's these guys from developing countries wearing their flappy shorts,
Mm,
in bare feet,
mm.
way behind.
Yeah.
But there's one difference: they can run faster than we can,
Mm.
because they haven't. I mean, at school, for instance, we start out life being creative. We go to school and we're gradually taught to be less and less creative and to pass exams. Then when we leave school, go to college, we have to be taught to be creative again.
Mm.
But you go to countries in South America, in Africa, in India, Pakistan, and these people they're solving problems from a young age,
Yeah,
and they're doing incredible things, and that's the running faster bit. And if
and
they have access to the tools and technology,
which
as
they
well as
do,
that
which they
as well as
do.
that
Yeah. Mm,
ingenuity, then their future looks very bright for
mm,
those countries.
mm. Definitely. I mean, it's also I mean, this innovative advantage. Uh, if 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 the rich countries of Europe and the United States are too comfortable and not willing to take meaningful risks, I'm talking about technology, ideological change, progress, and in any aspect of life, if they're not willing to take that risk because they're too comfortable with how things are and content with status quo, then of course they're going to lose their edge, for sure. Um, but I mean, it's also a question. Um, I often get asked, like, so where, like, why is Europe and the United States, why is it still, many countries at least have a higher degree of innovation than, for example, Asia, which economically in many ways is comparable. And there are cultural differences to how you deal with and how you react to failure. I mean, by and large, in the United States, it's okay to have gone bankrupt. It's okay to have tried and tested something and failed at it. You're not It's not held against you. I mean, come on, look at Donald Trump. The man is one
Mm,
one serial failure after another. And despite whatever you think about Trump, it's still amazing to see that. What other country would that? I mean, he's a complete failure in every aspect of his life. He's still people. I mean, the right people for power, at least, still are okay with that. Where I can't see that happening in many other countries.
No, in the UK, if you went through the bankruptcy courts that many times, nobody would
Yeah, no,
look at
nobody
you.
would give you the time of day, you know.
No,
Um,
but I mean, there is a cultural thing as well. I mean, I spent a lot of the past 2 years actually talking to college and university lecturers in India, just helping them to get to grips with talking to
yeah,
their students. And one of the things I talked to them about, because I was quite interested, is this attitude to risk. Because when I actually last went out to India and talked to a lot of students, there was a lot of students on campus who were running businesses.
mm,
And I thought, that was great, doing all sorts of things.
mm,
And then you find out afterwards, well, they've just gone and got a job in the civil service.
mm,
And I wanted to avoid talking about stereotypes, but I said, well, look, is this the case? And it really was the case. Um, I know I can't pick an Indian name out of
yeah,
thin air, but some lad was running a part-time business whilst doing his degree.
yeah.
He left, and his mum said, "Son, you've got to get a
Real
full-time job.
job, a real job.
You've got to get a car,
Mm,
and you've got to get a wife. None of this risking money sort of
no,
thing." And it
yeah,
happens in not just in India, but in
yeah,
lots of
no, yeah, yeah,
cultures. And people just won't, you know, take that risk. People who work for the civil service or a large railway company or a large utility company.
yeah. But I mean, this willingness or tolerance of risk, the cultural differences are enormous. I think for me, one of the more, I don't know, the more brutal reminders of this was I did a talk in I did a failed TED talk about failure in Ivory Coast. This is like 4 years ago or something, and I was the speaker flown in from abroad. It was a big deal, and I was like enjoying the attention, of course. And the pre-mingle sort of party before the actual TED event was, everybody was coming up to me, oh, Dr. West, I really enjoy your work and this, and it's all good. And then there's one woman, she comes up and she's angry. And she's like, she hates what I'm doing. She hates Museum of Failure. She doesn't understand what my deal is. And that was so refreshing. Like, why? And her argument was quite valid. She's like, you from Sweden or the United States, you have everything you need. So it's easy for you to talk about meaningful risk and taking risks. Whereas from her perspective, taking a risk means that somebody won't eat, or that somebody's economic security is threatened. And that we take that for we fail to address that when we're talking about meaningful risk and risking failure for innovation in general. That it's quite a privileged sort of point of view to say, yeah, let's risk everything and we'll still be okay.
But I mean, I've worked in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's true. Yeah, maybe they don't have everything there, and they can't take risks quite so often. But when they do, they do embrace the concept of risk taking, and they do it. They just have to weigh it up very carefully.
Yeah, yeah.
But some very, very ingenious, clever people innovating in a small way. So, I mean, another interesting question here: if we've got to, I don't know, reform the education system in some way. Let's start with universities, because they turn out a lot of our captains of industry, not all of them. What on earth should they be leaving with, instead of the sort of traditional MBA or whatever it is they leave with? Or rather, how should we be changing the syllabus? What should we be putting on there?
The sad thing about higher education, regardless of which country it's in, is that the majority of all higher education is just an extension of elementary school, more or less. It's the search for right answers to the questions. It's not empowering or encouraging students to actually explore and experiment, and that's a shame. And And I see it every time I'm involved, whether I give a talk at a university or involved in research projects. It's the same sad story where you're in a fictive environment. It's called school. Nothing you do, it's where you can experiment. It's where you can explore without taking the real life consequences, theoretically. But in reality, everything is career focused from day one. And the students say, how is this going to help me get a better job or more pay? Or how am I going to get a better grade if I do this? The system is already creating obstacles to exploration, which is, I can't see, if you can't do it when you're 21 years old in school, how on earth are you going to do it when you're 41 in some corporate setting? So that's one thing I think is important, which I don't have a solution to because I haven't actually seen anybody succeed with this, where you can have, I shouldn't be so dogmatic. There are exceptions to that, but by and large, the university systems do not encourage people to take risks and to truly explore. That's one thing. The second thing is, and this just comes from my background, researching play and the state of flow. I feel sad when I meet groups of 20-year-olds or 21-year-olds who are already tapping into their bored adulthood, right when they're 21, instead of having and really embracing that free thought and that sort of passion for the curiosity about life. They're already thinking in terms of basically mortgage and picking up kids at preschool and that stuff. I'm like, you have all your life to think about that. Use your time now to truly sort of discover what you can do, what your abilities are. And I think most universities and higher education fail to address this. That's one thing. And then the other one, the more about failure is, and I've worked on several projects in the past 2 years, is how to help this, particularly the high performing students. The super high performing students are often the ones that are the most afraid of failure, and how to help them both sort of gain confidence in their ability to recover from and deal with failure, and also to increase their willingness to take those risks. But that's more specific failure. So you got a huge answer there.
Well,
I don't have a problem talking.
I know you are. I know you are. What was I going to say? It was the question actually about is it as simple as, oh, there you are. You've come back. Is it as simple as the distinction or the difference between teaching and learning? Is it that simple, or is it a bit more, or is it a bit more subtle than that?
Backtrack. I didn't understand the question.
Well, we're talking about the higher education and stuff like that, and the fact that people are not doing the stuff that they're going to school. They're I'll put myself back. You can have a rest there, but they're going to school. They're not experimenting. They're being taught to pass exams. The end result, they're supposed to pass exams. They're supposed to go on and get their jobs, and they're not necessarily free thinking. So should we actually be just teaching people to learn themselves, and they go out and experiment and learn, and so the goal for school or university or whatever should be effectively to learn enough for you to go out into the world, not to pass this exam and that exam and the other exam, and then that curiosity maybe would last them for the rest of their lives. And
some of the most amazing people that I've worked with in the past 20 years on projects in very diverse fields, the most amazing people are people that they're not they might not even be working with their field of expertise, like it's people that are that have a broad range, sort of they know how to learn, they're curious, they're willing to learn, and they can quickly adapt to and become, very skilled in whatever niche they're working on at the moment. And I think, the sort of, I don't know, that sort of industrial period notion of school, that's the higher education is to create workers for the knowledge working sector. It's a cynical way of looking at things, and it's sad for the students themselves as well. But if we can teach students to actually learn and to be curious and how to sustain that, I can't imagine how that wouldn't be better than the current system. Yeah. There's one program. It's not the only one, but there's one. I think it started in Denmark, and it's I don't know if it's a 2 or a 3 year program. It's called, I love the name it, Chaos Pilots. So navigating chaos. Isn't that what we need more of? Like, how do we navigate in a chaotic world that's ever changing? It's to me, that sounds more valuable than learning knowledge that was only relevant 20 years ago.
Yeah. There's a lady, you've probably heard of her, Nadia Zexembayeva, who talks about the Reinvention Society. And she's got, I can't remember exactly her statement on chaos, but it's something along the lines of that chaos isn't a problem. The problem we have is when our chaos is in chaos. We have like lots of chaoses, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. We need to get our heads straight such that we just manage chaos. And that was her spin on it, which I think is quite good. There's also I can't remember the title of the book now, but they talk about 2 of my heroes, which are Albert Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci. And Einstein is famously supposed to have said that he wasn't very clever. He was just possibly the most curious person on the planet. And Leonardo, there was no statement about. Obviously, he's a bit
no
old.
No sound bite from Leonardo. Yeah,
he's a bit old now, but we knew him as a painter and an engineer.
Yeah.
He left behind him hundreds and hundreds of notebooks with designs and sketches. But the interesting thing was not just those, but he had lists of people that he wanted to speak to. He was that curious. He thought, right, I need to, Samuel West, he's on there. I'll go and talk to him.
Yeah.
And that was the curiosity. If he'd had Google, goodness knows what he'd have done.
Been a dangerous dude.
Dangerous, but that seems to be the thing we keep coming back to is curiosity.
Yeah. But how do you so curiosity, people, it's not evenly distributed amongst people. Some people are just not curious about their environment, about other people, or about when it comes to knowledge. That's fine. Okay, there's some variation there, but like you mentioned earlier, kids are, by their very nature, most kids are curious and want to learn by experimentation. They want to try things. But then society and school kills that. How is it conceivable that we have like courses in the university called, rekindling or rewiring your brain for added curiosity, or like how to find that curiosity again? Because I know with older patients, my wife works with in the elderly care, that people who maintain curiosity into old age, it is actually not that rare, but the people who do it have like much better social lives. They have much better cognitive function, just keeping that curiosity alive and not starting to take things for granted or be disinterested in it. I'm terrified about as I get older and older, to just someday thinking I know it all and I don't have to be curious anymore.
Yeah, there are some people that do that, but even if you get to it doesn't matter whether it's a ripe old age or not.
Mm.
Just ask the question, why? How
Mm.
does that work? Why is that so? Or why did that happen last week and this happens this week? I mean, it doesn't take a lot. The only problem for most people who might wonder that, especially in the workplace, is that you sort of get accused of, I don't know, insubordination, shall we say? When the boss
A
says,
pain in the
do it
ass.
like
Yeah.
do it, yeah, do it like that. Why?
Mm.
Um, but that's the sort of thing. You do need people, not necessarily to challenge, but people just to ask the questions, and you need everybody to be prepared
Mm.
for those challenges. So all of a sudden, the idea of curiosity starts getting bigger and bigger
Mm.
and bigger. It sort of extends to empathy as well.
Mm.
So, but yes, interesting. So yeah, curiosity, chaos, definitely on the yeah. How about pomegranates? Should they be on the course as well?
Well, well, the two best fruits in the world are mangoes and pomegranates, and I say this with certain authority, and it's not open to discussion. So one thing about mangoes is that at least when you buy them here in Europe, it's like a lottery. Like everybody, more or less, everybody likes a good mango, but if you go buy a mango in the shop, regardless of what it costs or where you buy it, it's still a lottery. More likely than not, you're going to get a mango that's bad. But we still keep trying we still buy them because we know that every now and then we get lucky and there's a good mango. I was trying to find some kind of way to relate this to our discussion, and I can't.
Dearie me. There's something there all about context as well, because I must admit I hate fruit and vegetables with a
What? How can
vengeance.
you hate fruit?
Yeah, I hate fruit and vegetables with a
Oh,
vengeance. But if you
oh,
take me somewhere tropical and feed
oh,
me
yeah.
mangoes and
You'd be like,
papaya and
ah.
yeah, I just lie there with my mouth open. Come feed me.
But maybe we're onto something here. So the context is not just the context. It's also that the mangoes in Thailand or Indonesia are better than the ones at the supermarket next door.
But they could have started growing in the same place.
That's true. That's true.
And they've just had a longer journey to get there. Maybe the moral we draw from that is that simplicity is actually better.
Hmm?
The shorter the journey, the simpler the journey, the more tasty the fruit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Blimey, I think we could have done it there, you know.
I don't know. I'm still disappointed. I still want a complex and all-encompassing theory of something relating to mangoes. I'll have a better think about. I'll publish it in a book next year called
Yeah, I think so. I'm a little like Einstein's general theory of relativity, or when Stephen Hawking wanted to put everything together. You feel the need to combine all the theories about fruit.
I did get a I did last year I thought I'm gonna so my favorite, as many psychologists claim that the favorite philosopher is Ludwig Wittgenstein, who has a really nice quotes and thoughts on things. So I thought I would read his main book. So I think I got to page 3 when I realized that I don't understand anything. And there's no way I could possibly understand what this dude was trying to convey. So he's one of those philosophers that I'll just keep quoting and pretend like I understand, but I don't get it.
So sounds good to me. In fact, whilst that's good, they gave me a chance to put this up. because people who are watching need to know how they might go and get in contact. So you can go
Yeah.
and see the Museum of Failure online. You can see the Museum of Failure on Facebook, on Instagram, and you can also search for Samuel West on LinkedIn as well. And you'll find, if not all you need to know, enough to go and find out more about the things you do want to know. So I think that's good for that. So
Awesome.
we're just about coming up to the end. It's
Yeah.
yeah, that you could talk for hours on this sort of stuff, couldn't you? So
Definitely.
definitely. So thank you for coming along today. It's been an interesting mango and pomegranate, not quite filled, but we've touched on it, which is good, because I
Well,
didn't even know
I
how.
feel I've been at this. I've failed. I promised that fantastic theories, and then I couldn't press those theories out of the fruit.
Well, temporarily then we'll put you into the Museum of Failure.
Yeah, please.
And once you've published the book with the theory
Yes,
of fruit
we
in
can
it,
promote the hell out of it. Yeah.
yeah, you can come back again and talk about the book. How
Yes.
about that?
Sounds like a
So
deal.
anyway, thanks for coming on. I'll yeah, I'm sure our paths will cross on LinkedIn or somewhere
Or somewhere.
related to fruit.
Awesome.
So okay then, bye
Thank you
for now
very
then.
much.
Right, so that was fun. Next week, next week there is a replay of this, but in a fortnight's time, episode 5, my guest will be Samuel Johnson from VIT University in Andhra Pradesh in India. So if he's listening, that'll scare the living daylights out of him. So anyway, thanks very much for watching, and keep a lookout for the next episode. Bye for now.